Welcome back, audience. Hope you're doing good. Welcome to the second part of Three Types of Time. And where we left off last time, I remember I was talking about the astral space time and the capacities of that and limitations of that. Um, Now, I think right now we at that point where we can talk about this concept of ego. What is ego? Ego is when that space-time folded in a fixed pattern and it does not move. That's the ego. And that the real ego is at the causal level, because everything else is a consequence of that. So it's basically a misfoldment of space-time continuum. It's a misfoldment because it creates memory, which is static, within your heart, which is supposed to be fluid and ever changing. And this is why it creates look, sometimes people call a heart of coal. Because why? It's because everything is kind of static and it does not have fluidity. Whereas like a diamond, if you look at it, it has the fluidity, the way the light diffracts from it, and it is alive. And so that's what you want to turn the coal into the diamond through alchemy. Okay. And that is a truly great work. Everything else is just games. Okay, so, but you see, system is self-correcting. Like you don't need to worry about anything. Everything is so lawful. Everything is so perfect that it's just going to happen the way it happens. And the whole point of it is to just figure out how it all works, understand what kind of price you have to pay for the things that you have to get, because alchemy is you paying the price. Because, you're entering the state that is disorganized, and only through alchemy, through courage and surrender, you can organize it back into the spirit, right? You take the matter, which is memory, matter, memory, mother, right? These are all connected words. They mean the exact same thing. It's a memory. And that's where the matrix is coming from as well. It is this type of knowledge and the memory that is recorded in your soul. And unless that's alchemized, you're not out of the matrix. You're just not. Okay? This is the beyond the archons, beyond the demiurge. Demiurge is this memory, the static time space field where it's not supposed to exist. Very simply said. Okay. Now, if you're out of it, and you can only get out of it through alchemy, then you are no longer suffering. There's no suffering there anymore. Okay? The basis of your reality is not suffering anymore. And so there's no more seeking. Because your essence now is true identity, not the one that was static, but the one that is fluid and ever changing and diffracting the way it's supposed to be. And if you're a male, then you're going to find yourself to be that. You're going to find yourself to be that structure, that the pattern that keeps on changing to create these feelings, these reflections, which is a feminine, right? And so, but if you're a female, then you discover that field who you are, that field. Does that make sense? That's the state of surrender, and that light is the state of courage. And so that's what you find yourself to be, like, at the core. Love and truth, or power and love, right? And that flux between love and truth is where you have, like, that the point of infinity, that ultimate awesomeness. It's a flux between the love and truth, because people tend to, in language, tend to use the word, love is the answer, and sometimes they say, right, love, but it is not, ironically, it is not true. The answer is something it is between truth and love. That's the answer. You cannot be all truth, and you cannot be all love. Every time you move to one another, you create a disorder. Okay? Because you move away from the coherence. And the coherence exists only in between love and truth, between that structure and the field, the pattern and the field. Okay? That right. And if anything stems from that coherence, okay, you can take it to the bank. Now, that coherence can be falsified without dissolution of the ego, without alchemy, without burning yourself up in that Negredo stage. If you don't burn yourself up, yourself, that self that you believe to be, to discover your new self, what you really are, and if you don't burn this through, then you are in a state of persona, not individual. You're still in a persona. And a person can create the false light through the external means, and that's evil. And I think that's what the Luciferian light is. That's what the Luciferian light is. Not the Christ light, which is, like I always say, there's this dark passion and then there's light passion. Light passion is infinitely more powerful than the dark passion, by the way. And what is definition of power? Definition of power is to be able to determine the ideal pattern for that particular situation, for that particular moment in time. Is to be able to have, like, a perfect answer to the question portrayed to you, so to speak. You can also say, like, there's like this decoding the impossible, and things. There's many ways to say that, but that's the power. That's a real power. Only the quantum computer can resolve that type of problem. This is why your soul is a quantum processing unit. It is that intermediate between the infinite and the temporal. So the reality is going to fold based on wherever that power is, that coherence, which is the feeling of bliss. And it could be the feeling of hedonistic pleasure and the feeling of bliss, which are two different type of the false ecstasy and the real ecstasy. The false ecstasy always has consequences, and this is why, like I said, like, don't go into the dark more than once. Go all in, understand what that is, try it. This is why, like I say, that if the person went through it, then they have the experience of it, and when they come out of it and they're not going back there, not because they don't go back there because they have actually can't like metaphysically go back there, because the lesson has been learned. But if the lesson hasn't been learned, it's going to be sucked and so there's this looping that may happen. The looping is the problem, I say. I don't consider, at least that's my current view right now, I don't consider going into that wrong way once a bad thing or anything wrong with the game. Because when you come out of it or transcend it, then you are uncorruptible, because you've been in that space of corruption and you got out uncorrupted. So that's the thing about the alchemy, because I know for a fact that people talk about Jesus and what kind of wonderful man he was and whatnot. But I can tell you for sure he went into the dark places once at least, and he did probably the most atrocious things at the beginning of his life. Because not because I have like an opinion about him, I just know the hero's journey of somebody who can come out that crisp and clean and that precise. Only who been through the grinder, and that means that there was some sort of embracing of darkness for at least once. Does that make sense? This is why best people who can, for example, catch criminals are the ex-criminals. When they're the criminal that is reformed is like the best cop, because they know how they think and can what I'm trying to say. That's what makes that cop good. Or like anybody, like a politician who was like super corrupt and got clean, is way better politician than somebody just came in as a goody two shoes without any kind of experience of the dark way. So then I'm arriving to what is wrong. And again, I'm arriving to what is wrong is looping. Because I mean, if you listen to music and you have like a record or the vinyl playing something and it goes, I mean, there's no music. That's clearly a problem. That was not intended. Okay, so that's the only thing that I say that is a problem. Is the repetition of the same lesson over and over again. It means that there's no attention has not been yet placed where it needs to be placed. Okay, and this way, like, I don't judge the people who went into any kind of form of darkness and they went into hedonistic or ascetic type of satisfaction in life. I don't judge them. I mean, come on, like, I mean, who am I to speak about it? Because like I have been obsessing on the things that like that would be like the most wrong thing to do. Um it's crazy. It is crazy to do this, but anyway, that's the truth. Anyway, so I think that I said before that every hero used to be a villain, and it's true. And it's true. But the problem, I mean, the situation with the hero that they only fuck up once, and they have the right answers to it. Okay, so there. Anyway, I'm repeating myself. Let's move on. Okay, so about time. Talked about chronological time, which is measured with the sequence, and that's what's being stitched together in a so-called physical reality, which is nothing more but your CPU being online. Okay, that's all it is. Your CPU being online. That's what the physical reality is. It's basically you are now processing everything that you see in a chronological sense, and there's this memory, this seemingly motion through space time. That is an experience, right? And that's what most people can observe, and they believe that's it. No. And the physical reality, of course, it's a virtual reality. It doesn't really, it's not solid. It's projected. Does that make sense? So it's all just projection of the energy. So, but it's important, and your CPU does that, and it is important. As see, the CPU or a brain is not never a problem. It's how you use it. If you point it to wrong direction, and I always say, like, you can point your CPU wrong direction or the right direction. It's incredible tool when you put it in the right direction, and it's no longer like acting like a master. It's as a tool, and it's a CPU, and it's you use it. You use it for your memory, for your moving through space time, because that is the world of sensations. That's what it creates, the phenomena of sensations, right? It dissects that primordial feeling. The mind dissects it into the form, the images, and then the body, or that your avatar, when it's used correctly, that type of CPU, that type of computer, it dissects it into the sensations. Is what is the five sensations that we have. Actually, there are six, and the seventh being all of them encompassing. This is why one of the best, I suppose, tricks of alchemy is point your attention to that most incoherent state within your consciousness, and then once you're there, you experience everything through all of your senses at once. And then there's that magic starts happening. Start tripping balls. Not really, but you know what I mean. Very positive way. And the reason it works is because how consciousness is structured. And because you're all of your attention on all the senses, there's no space for your computer to do move in that direction. And then as soon as your computer stops back flowing, immediately you're entering in a deeper states and whatnot. And then the only way it can flow is flow forward, used as a tool. And so your identity becomes more like a feelings rather than the thought processes, you see. Okay, so anyway, when you go into this deeper state, this trance, this hypnotic state, or theta state, now you are kind of out of that backwards flow of the CPU. Let's just say that. Now we're entering chirological time. And what is a chirological time? Again, you can imagine anything you want from all the potential past and potential future. And the chirology, the past is always something that is you would call negative, which is a separation from your desire, from the image that you want to see. And the future will always be the connection with the desire and the fulfillment of your desire as an image that you would like to be. Now, the limitation at this point is based on limitation of your level of development in your soul. So if you still sort of have a heart of coal, there's going to be limit of what kind of realities you can visit. That's why you're going to have to work within that frame. And if you are not doing any kind of alchemy, the all imagination that you're going to use is going to be the type of dark magic. And the black magic would be like very, very dark, and the like a gray magic would be sort of light. It is, for example, what you're trying to manifest, right? If you're trying to manifest the car, but you still have not paid your price and you're just relying purely on your imagination, but not, you may get that, but it's not going to have the quality of that. And that would be a type of theft of energy, because any kind of false light, that positive feeling without alchemy, is going to be stolen somehow. Okay. And that's what you would call somebody's, a witch or a warlock and whatnot. There is no such thing as a good witch. By this definition, a witch or a warlock, whatever you want to call it, is somebody who controls the world of magic, imagination, however, does not have any kind of currency to pay for it. So they has to steal from other people. So have to subjugate somebody else. Okay, and that's witchery basically. This is why, like, this movie Witcher is actually, bad name for it. It's because basically of what you see him doing, he's actually killing the monsters, basically getting the coin and getting the gems from the monsters. So he's actually a depiction of an alchemist. He's not a depiction of a witcher. He's actually fighting the ones that are witchers. So anyway, I don't know why they call it like that, but I think it might be, not correct by that definition. Why there's no such thing as a good witch or a good, warlock and whatnot? It's because of, for somebody to become good, is automatically is not going to be a witch or a warlock. You need another name for it. You cannot use the same thing. That's actually the word lady and a gentleman actually means that, but that's usually not used for that, reason. But anyway, there's many other words like, sorcerers, and like sorcerer's stone, right? Philosopher's stone. Many names for it. That's why, like, sometimes people call it philosopher, and they're not philosopher. They usually like a scholar, not a philosopher. There's most of the words that we use for to mean, what is real philosophy, which is love for Sophia. And we misappropriate that word to mean something else, and it's just like a scholar. Maybe a good scholar, but that person is not a philosopher, because it's still functioning on the persona level. Now you may ask a question. It's like, okay, so everything is bad through the persona level? No, everything is static through the persona level. You could have somebody who has ego, but they're not necessarily like well, actually, I cannot say that. If their ego means the static thing in your heart, then that could be minor or big evil. It could be gray or dark, whatever, right? But it does not mean that these people don't respond to the energies of love. Their egos kind of dissolve or disappear temporarily in front of like another type of energy that is, source based. So there are people who just, like, when they are under that type of influence or under that type of energy, they gladly surrender their ego in exchange for love and truth. And so they're sort of animated for time being. Okay, they don't have their own connection, but now at least they're moving through soul because they've been sort of flashed by a person. I shouldn't say person, by some individual or psychedelic. Okay, and so their work is not alchemy, but their work is to basically surrender their ego. That's pretty much like if they surrender their ego and they fall back on that energy of truth and love, then they're gonna be functioning perfectly fine um, in the world. And they they didn't have to alchemize their ego, and they still can be a good soul, right? But it does not mean that they have wisdom yet. They're still innocent at that point. They have to rely on somebody who does have that. Does that make sense? They're still like a child soul, but there could be good souls out there just purely because they surrendered their ego. And I think then the other types of souls just went too much into dark. Um, they need more extreme, sort of like exorcism. This is where we're going to the exorcism. You know, if up to 50%, let's just say, right? If a person is did not go too dark and they're 50%, then they have the capacity to surrender their ego. If the person went too dark, then they will refuse to surrender their ego, even in perfect conditions. That's why it will require way deeper type of power. And like I said, the power is something that is able to decode the problem, the issue. And so that's why somebody who has this level of darkness can only be saved by somebody who have like corresponding levels of light in the perfect pattern to unlock that. And that's what you would call an exorcism. Because now you don't have to use this type of approach to the souls that are obedient, I suppose, but not, of course, not to the matrix, but obedient to the real light. They open up, they surrender ego, gone. That's it. Don't need to do anything else. But if they cross into another line where they don't do this voluntarily, again, I'm repeating myself, but that's what it is. Then, see, this is the answer to this, like, what kind of free will people have. And that's why it's not like a straightforward question, because the question may be, so like, is there a free will in everybody outside of you, and should you let them do whatever they do? No, of course not. Like, because there's a lot of people who you shouldn't let them do what they're trying to do, right? They went too dark. And other people, they can be convinced, and you don't have to force them because they respond to reason. So you have these people who respond to reason, and so of course you don't force them because it's not necessary to force them. But then you have people who are completely taken out by ego, and without certain degree of force, they're not going to do it. So to say correctly, and that's what you may call it, like evil, when they cross into that point where there's no voluntary surrender in front of like love, right? They don't respond to love anymore. And up to that point, it would be kind of, you can call it like naughty. But when it crosses that line, that's when you go evil, because the evil does not have free will. But anything less than that does have free will and should not be forced. Okay. So that's the answer to the free will of ego. So like how much authority do you have over them? And you completely allow the free will up to that point, unless the soul went too dark. If they went too dark, you don't allow it free will, and your responsibility is actually to block their will and alchemize the ego, and through the exorcism, right? And that's the spiritual war side. Like up to that point where you just need to light up the people with love, the ones that respond to love. There's no war there. There's just, you just spread love, right? And people respond to it, and it's all good and all awesome. But when you cross this line, then you're dealing with something that does not respond to love, and you need an exorcism to do this. Okay, and that's pretty much the game that I'm describing. That happens on the causal level. The game is just that the time space has been folded so much in such a static way that it's such a rigid thing that it's kind of prison. And now you need to go through the labyrinth and figure out how to unlock that prison. And that's what you do. That's pretty much the exorcism is what that is. It's not brute force. It's actually much more precise and elegant type of process. You see. So okay, of course, right? That's how you know, because most people just respond to reason. People who don't respond to reason, you got to be careful, and they're going to be challenging, and you won't be able to deal with it without alchemy. And that's kind of type of like insidious darkness. That's why it's called war or spiritual war, because uh, neither sides are willing to give up. There has to be a battle. The soul and an ego, and they're at the battle. You see, and the soul wins by decoding the ego, and yeah, and acquiring that type of shape that can unlock that type of distortion. Right, and I think in the end it becomes like a complementary. I don't think that sort of the evil or that these dark structures kind of disappear. I think they remain, but because they are completely complementary, unlocked by the light, but the code of light, they remain as is in service of the light, basically being like to create technology. These, for example, people call us psychopaths and stuff like that. They're great because they love building things and technology. They just don't have the inner guidance to know what's good and what's not good, and so they just build technology, right? And or are involved in the architecture of the society. And if they just you know don't have the lacking light, they have to act through the darkness, basically. That's what I arrived. I don't know if you can ever um, change them. I think you can only complement them. And when there is that, this they will remain having that distortion, but you're going to have a corresponding type of structure that decodes it, and in turn the result is going to be equilibrium. I think that's more likely than you are sort of destroying that distortion. Does that make sense? Because in this particular game, then that's the role that they play, and only somebody who got to the point of engaging in their own alchemy could actually do that. I don't know. Maybe these people who are now being sort of complimented and they don't have to do the dark things to feel good because you see because of this defeat in the spiritual war. Maybe then they little by little slowly would also engage in this type of activity of uh, letting go of their ego. Yeah, that's it. That's it. Only when completely unlocked and when you acquire that structure that is completely complementary to their ego, will the ego begin to dissolve permanently in them. Huh. Yeah, that's it. All right. So, yeah, and the last one is the eonological, if you will, the eon. That's where you coherence levels are being determined. That's the alchemy and everything that I was just talking about at this point. And so we have these types of times: the chirological time, which is the satisfaction of your mind desire. Then we have eonological time, which is satisfaction of your soul desire. And then chronological time, where is the satisfaction of your body desire. And so when you begin with the soul desire, and then we'll go into the mind desire, and then body desire, you're using all three types of times in its um, sphere appropriately. Okay, I think in a book of the Law of One, I think Ra also mentioned about this. This is called service to self, service to others, but it's such a bad name. Like I don't like it because it just says the coherence levels in the soul and how dark they are, but um, there's no reason. For example, the problem may happen is that if you do service to others, that this means that like you don't need anything. No, it's not true. Of course, that's why you're not service to others really, but you have the coherence level, and you do not need that energy from the outside because you have the sustainable access to it. That's it. Okay, and that's the only thing that it means. And so, why would we need like the darkest uh, entities here? So that it could be possible to develop the lightest entities here. That's why. It's just the level of the game. And by the way, the game is not at the highest level right now. The intensity is kind of high, but um it's not Kali Yuga, it's Dvapara Yuga. So the the most light that could be and when I say light, I don't just I mean this capacity to decode that encryption, which is the dark power, if you will. It's That's the real power. The real power is not just brute force. It's not just flow of energy and stuff like that. It is this precisely encoded in exactly the way it's supposed to be encoded, and it's a flow of energy that is incredibly intelligent. That's power. Intelligence is power, and you can falsify the intelligence through using that false light, that fictitious way, which is what the dark power is. You see, it is pretending to be coherent. but really it's not. It's a honey trap. Okay, guys. What else I can babble about this? So we have those chronological, chirological. See, and if you look at it this way, it may help you to see how, you know, time really is like space time. Like, for example, if you can move to any kind of possible space time point, what does that mean? That means that um, your environment, your space that you are, can be generated in exactly this way, right? And if you generate it in exactly this way, then your logical mind, your CPU says this is 1986 and this location over here, right? Then that data is just being created to index where you actually are, right? But what you actually are in is the sensations that surround you, right? Okay. um and the conditions of outside. So if you can dream that up, and that's what the chorology is, then you can move any kind of space time continuum. And the point of this game is to move to the one that you desire the most. It's the arrangement of your outside. It's just, it's interesting if you start thinking like that. The chronological time kind of falls off, and you realize that, oh, this is just like a clay. I can build it up any kind of way I want it, and only later the mind indexes it as a particular time in space. It's just a number that has been added, but everything is just like a pure positioning of matter, in the astral matter. It's not really matter yet, but yeah, it is like primordial matter that you position in perfect whichever way you like, and that is what you're most likely going to get in the physical. Okay. But the limitation of that space-time continuum is super fluid, but the limitation is coherence. You can only go to where that coherence can take you. Yeah. And that's why if you do not go through the heart, you do not get the coherence. And so therefore you're limited of what kind of realities you can create in astral. Okay. And there are these gender roles and all of that, obviously. And my realization is that um, you got to pick which one you're playing, which kind of role you're playing. I think that's, besides all the mess that's going on in society, ultimately when you are exploring life and consciousness at this point, you will conclude that, like, oh, you chose either to be the light or you chose to be the love, because it's very clear to you that, like, oh, you cannot play two roles at the same time. You kind of have to take one or the other at any point in time. And if the more you are in the masculine, the more this complementary feminine you receive, and you don't have to be feminine, right? Does that make sense? And vice versa. The more you're into the feminine, the more you automatically receive the masculine, and you don't have to be in masculine. And this is where you can have like the highest polarization, and therefore the highest power. It is when the gender roles are so owned completely, that the man is owning masculinity, what the true masculinity is, the real power, completely all the way, and the woman is owning the femininity and feminine power completely all the way. and that's you can generate the most power. Obviously, you can see that in um, just interaction with people. Like when I'm talking about, of course, the vibe, the energy. Then if the woman is completely in that state of devotion, then it's going to be responding very strongly to uh, uh, the light, right? Love responds to the light very strongly. They attract each other and create the most polarization and the most like, you know. You see what I'm trying to say? Okay, and yeah, so and the game becomes quite obvious is that like, yo, you gotta polarize more into the choice that you made to be. Whereas if you see in the Matrix, that is the opposite motion that happens. In the Matrix, they say, you know, let's just be gender fluid. Whereas in the holistics, you say, no, let's just not be gender fluid. Let me take my responsibility completely. Who I am, just I'm going to accept myself completely, who I am, and the side that I play, the gender that I play. You see the difference between holistics and the Matrix. And I mean, there's nothing better for a man to feel when the man is in his natural element. Nothing better for a woman to feel when the woman is in her natural element. This is why my philosophy of life is a polarize to the maximum. See how far you can go as a man and how far you can go as a woman, as a feminine, and then you'll understand what the real power is. Is this spark that happens between the two, and you can't have that spark unless you're completely, polarized to your true natural element. Okay, that's it. That's enough. You had enough. Okay, about the time. And of course, at the end, there is an infinity, the source of everything, of complete potential, total potential, absolute. Uh, so that's the game of life. There's three types of time, and I think I've explained enough. These are the principles to understand and navigate this game of life. And do look at everything as a game, and like I said, do take responsibility for the gender you picked. Like, own the game that you chose to play completely and totally. You see, that's maybe like, easier said than that, but if you do that, then everything's going to fall into place. You're not going to try to be something that you're not. It's just about like something that you are, and you're going to get the most out of it. Matrix is something that does the opposite to you. This is why you see people confused about their identity. Holistics is very clear. It's like, what is there to be confused about? It's already selected. Like, I mean, when you start a video game and you pick the gender, you go male or female. And then mid games to start, you know, um, engaging in activities that you're not good at, or it becomes very difficult with a lot of effort and with a lot of, price to pay. It's just whatever, right? It's just like nonsense. One of those things that needs to be picked. Okay, I'm glad we agree. All right, guys, peace, and I'll see you in the next one.